Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for our fourth ACG Watch Party. Tonight, we are going to be watching Austin Pictures. And I should say this is actually just part one of our Austin Pictures viewing party. In 2 weeks, we're going to be back with special guest Jorge Caballero for Austin Pictures Watch Party Part 2. It was a long show. There were actually 3 different acts. And so to get through all of that amazing material, we need 2 watch parties. But tonight's watch party is going to be amazing, and it's going to put you in the mood to watch the next one. My name is Matt Hinsley. I am Executive Director of Austin Classical Guitar. From all of us here at ACG, we hope that you are well. We hope your families are well. We hope that you're finding ways to stay connected with people and finding reasons to smile. And we hope that music is a part of your life. We hope that the events that we've been producing and this event tonight will give you something to think about, to be excited about, to share with friends. Most of all, we're grateful to you for being with us. How it will work is that we are going to introduce a couple of special guests. We are going to have a conversation about the evening of Austin Pictures, which was October 1st, 2011. And then we will watch together a couple of different video excerpts from incredible footage that KLRU made of that very, very special evening. After all that is over, should be about 45 minutes, I'd say, we'll be back for our Q&A portion. So if you're watching this on YouTube, then you can just go to your Q&A chat section on the left, make comments anytime you want, but certainly at the end, go ahead and ask any questions that you might have, and we will read them to our wonderful guests and get a good conversation going thanks to your comments and your observations. I want to just give you a quick report on something special that happened at Austin Classical Guitar over the weekend, and some of you may know about this already, but we had a donor offer a matching gift to buy up to 100 guitars for kids in our Title I school programs who don't own their own instruments. And this has been a major concern of ours ever since we went to remote education in the district shut down their in-person instruction. And so while a lot of kids in our programs own their own instruments, many kids rely on the school guitars. And I'm really pleased, kind of overwhelmed, honestly, to report that 77 of you came forward and gave gifts totaling the maximum amount that we could have for our matching donor to match. And we've already had over 80 guitars ordered by kids in Title I schools, and we've got some more that are going to be coming in tomorrow. So kids from all over Austin are going to be getting guitars next week, and they'll be able to participate in their music education for the next month. And I got to tell you, their reactions are so priceless. And it's all part of this big, beautiful thing that is a community coming together, working together to make beautiful things happen. And we feel so privileged at ACG to be able to have a window into this. And in some ways, I think that's really at the heart of what tonight's conversation is all about. We're talking about a piece called Austin Pictures and an evening that was called Austin Pictures. I mentioned it was October 1st, 2011. We had heard that one of our favorite guitarists in the world, Jorge Caballero, was playing Mussorgsky's famous work, Pictures at an Exhibition, on one guitar. Now that is a virtually impossible feat. And so it was very exciting for us when we learned that he was doing that. To play that piece on one guitar is very, very rare indeed. But what it did is it inspired us to build an evening around it. And the new ACL Live at the Moody Theater had just opened downtown in Austin. And so we contacted our friends at KLRU and hatched a plan to create a television show surrounding Jorge's superhuman performance of Pictures at an Exhibition. But that grew in scope to become an idea of getting kids involved, to play a new work written by our composer in residence and artistic director, Joe Williams, called Austin Pictures, about Austin. And we wanted to commission kids in town to paint their own Austin versions of the 11 themes that are outlined in Mussorgsky's Pictures at an Exhibition. Made a little movie about them. And then we asked our dear friends at the Miro String Quartet, which is one of the great jewels of music in our area, to join us on the evening. And that all together with the Alamo Drafthouse and the KMFA and many Austin partners created this beautiful evening. And that's why it's worthy of a watch party tonight. So here to reminisce and help us put some perspective on this evening, we have three very special guests. And the first I'd like to introduce is Maestro Peter Bay from Austin Symphony Orchestra. There he is. Peter, I'm so excited that you are with us tonight. Thank you for joining us.
Well, Matt, it's a pleasure. It's nice to be with you, albeit from a safe distance, and a wonderful experience to revisit this wonderful piece of Joe's.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. And we've got lots of questions for you. So we'll get to those soon. We also are joined by our dear friend, Daniel Ching, who is the first violinist of the Miro String Quartet. Daniel was with us that night. We've done lots of fun stuff together over the years. Daniel, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Oh, well, thanks for having me on. It's great to see you guys.
Man, I miss you. I'm glad we get to at least do this, huh?
Yes.
And of course, this particular reminiscence would not be possible, nor would it be complete without the composer that wrote the work, our composer in residence, and our artistic director at Austin Classical Guitar, Mr. Joe Williams. So Joe is with us, and there Joe has magically appeared. Joe, we're so glad to have you with us tonight, man.
Oh, so good to be here. Thank you, Matt.
So, guys, we're in a wild time right now. Here we are in Brady Bunch boxes here around the screen, visiting because we're not supposed to be in the same place at the same time. And so much of our lives, Daniel, I think of you in a quartet playing with three people. I would imagine this is the longest you three have ever been apart from one another, aside from before you were together as a quartet.
Yeah, I mean, one can't imagine, being a chamber musician. We rely on playing with other people, and I could never in my wildest dreams or even just nightmares think of what situation would keep us apart for this long. And even if we wanted to play together, would we have to all sit 6 feet apart? I mean, you can't even write that kind of thing up, but here we are, and it's a little crazy, but in some ways there's a silver lining. We get to do something like this, which is new and different.
We're all learning, aren't we? And we're all adapting. And really, in a lot of ways, I'm quite proud of the community and of the human race and discovering, what we can do. But Peter, maybe I'd love your thoughts just on music. What's music for you at this time? How's music helped you be together with other people in your life?
Well, it's interesting. If I could just backtrack a minute for something that Daniel said, I can't imagine what it's like not being able to play with three others. But I'm used to working with about 100 people at the same time, and just envisioning doing that at this moment it's just not possible. But and of course, I make no sound as a conductor, so it's twice as bad. But I'll just say that what I've tried to do during this time where I'm not with the orchestra is just to immerse myself in music. And I found that even personally during rough times, I've always turned to music just to sort of get me out of the doldrums. And this being the 250th anniversary of Beethoven's death, I decided that sometime this year, I was going to listen to all 32 Beethoven piano sonatas again, and all of the string quartets again. And I've done that during this time off. I've had time to do it.
The Miro String Quartet recordings, I'm sure.
You need to get those. That's the set to own. They are
Checks in the mail, Peter.
Fantastic performances and extraordinary music. So I've been filling up my days just listening to music and trying to be with my family since I can't be with my orchestra.
Yeah.
Daniel, does that resonate with you as well? I mean, I'm amazed. I'll just throw in that I've gotten a couple of random reach outs from old students of mine who, have gone on to careers in not music, and they're picking up the guitar again in quarantine. I had one young man that I taught in the 90s. He's an engineer up in Dallas, and he sent me a recording of him playing a new piece today, and he's sending me sending me recordings every week just to keep himself accountable. He said, but finding that music again.
Yeah, isn't that? I mean, that's really incredible, actually. I mean, we're all in some ways, because of this big pause in life, I think a lot of us have kind of found a way to kind of reflect on, we've been busy all doing our own things, and we haven't had time to explore our passions. We all have suddenly a lot more time on our hands. Musicians in particular, we can't go on stages to play for everybody. But yeah, so as you know, the quartet's in residence at UT Austin. So our semester at the university has continued. And so one of the challenges that we've been faced with in the last few weeks is continuing this semester. And we, all of us at the faculty at the university really feel for the students. We have quite a number of students who are seeing their last semester at UT, and this is the way they're having to carry it out on Zoom and whatnot. And, I feel for them. But it's been still just as fulfilling for me and for all four of us in the quartet and everybody at the Butler School, to still be able to, we're making the most of what we can do over Zoom, over FaceTime teaching. And that's kept music in really 24/7 for us, besides being able to play our own instruments and making sound, Peter. But I mean, it's been a balance of listening to a lot of things that's inspired us in the past, working with our students that inspire us as teachers. Hopefully we can inspire them, and then doing things like this. We never get a chance to really sit down and talk and reflect on the concert from 9 years ago. I mean, this is the silver lining, I think, in all of this.
It reminds me of, actually, something that I've been thinking about just throughout this whole process, or maybe on my better days, I think about this as like, it really opens up like a level of appreciation for relationships. I mean, we think about this in music all the time because, especially in chamber or orchestra music, everybody's listening so deeply to each other and responding and reacting in time and having this really moment of really, I would say, living when it's going great, right? But I think that's the same with we're very similar in how we think about our relationships with everybody during this time. They're really, I do feel like they're so alive.
Yes.
Joe, can I ask you a question? I wonder if you and other composers have suddenly found some additional time just to write, where you don't have to really do much of any, well, I should say that. I'm sure you're busy doing other things, but do you now find that you have extra time to write?
Well, I would say that everybody on the ACG team has been going pretty pedal to the metal since March 12th. And so, no. But
I thought I'd ask anyway.
But I believe, I hope everybody in who has that opportunity, whether they're doing music or woodwork or writing, the poetry that they should be writing, are taking the time to do that. That's the goal. It's a good reminder. Thank you, Peter. Yeah. I'll see you guys later.
Yes. He just had an idea.
I love it. Well, I think it's time for us to listen to a little bit of music here. And Daniel, I want to ask you before we do that. So I mentioned at the start of the show that this was a big show, and it had a lot of different elements to it, and it was basically in 3 big acts. And so we had the Miro Quartet, and then Peter, you were conducting the quartet plus about 120 guitar players, and we'll talk about them in a minute. And then we had this magnificent guitar player, guest artist Jorge Caballero, who's been with us for so many projects over the years. And so we couldn't pass up an opportunity to put Jorge together with the Miro Quartet and actually have a quintet experience, and that's what Act 2 was in the show. And actually, it went so swimmingly, if I remember correctly, we actually ended up bringing you all back together again at the Long Center a couple of years later for an encore performance, just as a quintet. which is another story for another day.
That's right.
But so we thought we wanted to share tonight the Fandango that by Luigi Boccherini that you guys performed that evening. And I wonder if you could just say a few words about the piece or about Jorge or anything you think people might want to know before we listen to that performance.
Yeah, I remember the conversation we had. We had talked about, you had told me about Jorge, and the four of us in the quartet, not being completely immersed in the classical guitar world all at 24/7, we weren't aware of Jorge, but we all trust what Matt says in terms of the artistic. The guest artists that you bring in have always been not only great players, but very great individual voices. Mm-hmm. And when you spoke so highly of Jorge, I remember we were talking about how we were going to construct this program. Of course, Joe's piece was going to be the big piece on the program, and Jorge was going to play this Mussorgsky, this arrangement for one guitarist playing this giant orchestral piano work. We pretty much immediately knew that we had to throw something like this Boccherini on there, and the Boccherini was a great Italian cellist. He wrote a lot of string quintets, that is, string quartet with an extra cello. So a lot of you may know the Schubert cello quintet. So Boccherini was actually the one to kind of employ this instrumentation first, but he had a completely different approach to it than Schubert did. Boccherini, being a virtuoso cellist, needed a traveling orchestra, essentially. So he wrote almost 100 of these things, and they're really wonderfully vivacious, spirited works, and they show off the first cellist of this quintet. So really, he wrote these for himself to play, and he had this little quartet that could go along with them. And they're beautiful works. They're not just purely showpieces. But in this particular work, the last movement, the Fandango, this is probably the most famous of all the movements of all these quintets. He showcases the guitar. And so this is a perfect vehicle, as maybe perhaps we should say, for Jorge to show his Spanish chops. Boccherini was adopting the Fandango, which is a Spanish dance. And I don't quite remember what we did on this performance, but in the middle section, one of the string players is instructed to tap out the Fandango rhythm, either using castanet, which is the traditional instrument used in the Fandango, or slapping one of the instruments, and I can't remember what we decided to do. So I'm gonna be watching closely to see what we wield here.
Sounds great. Well, let's roll this Fandango with Miro Quartet and Jorge Caballero.
That's fun to watch 9 years later. I haven't seen it since.
So the verdict on the castanets then, it sounds like, I guess Josh was tapping on the side of the
He was
cello
tapping
there.
on the side. He was working. Josh actually had a brief career as a percussionist. I think in his youth orchestra, he was called upon to play. Oh gosh, I want to. I don't think it was the timpani, but something, snare drum or something, and they needed another percussionist, and he got up back there for a performance and played it. So I think that training really paid off.
Definitely.
Yeah, really impressive. Well, I was telling you guys before that we did have an unusual experience, Jorge and I. So Jorge is a very fine tennis player, and I'm a pretty avid tennis player myself. And so one of the things that we did in the run up to Austin Pictures was we auctioned off ourselves as a doubles duo to play tennis against anybody in Austin that would pay enough money, and then we were going to donate the money to our education program. So this doubles partners, these two gentlemen paid $1,000 to play Jorge and I in tennis the morning after Austin Pictures. And so we went over to, I think it was Austin Country Club. It was their turf. That's all I know. And it was brutal. Those guys were so good. And they had like the hand signals and everything. And they were like, which side of the net to stand on. And they just destroyed us.
I mean, the moment one of the partners came out and had the last name Roddick on the case, you probably should have known.
That's right.
Should have known that, he had a little bit more time, to hone his craft.
Okay, so Joe, I'm going to kind of throw it over to you. I've got a question for you now. We are going to listen soon here to the first two movements of Austin Pictures of the work. And I think in a lot of ways, you and I have talked about this whole project as kind of a love letter to our city, to the city of Austin. We have a project that brings together, over 100 students, actually from all over Texas, Oklahoma, and New Mexico, that came in to have this experience. Peter, your presence was absolutely, it was like the glue that brought everything, all of the disparate elements together. And the kids in the guitar orchestra were so excited to get to work with you and meet you and spend time with you. And having the Miro Quartet, Daniel was so spectacular. And so it's brought together all these elements. And so I guess, Joe, I'm curious about your thoughts just as far as this community, and maybe kind of what your thinking was in composing this piece.
Yeah, well, Matt, this idea and this project kind of started small and then really grew, and I think you guys just outlined it there for me. I'll tell a little bit of the story of the beginning of it. And really, this is kind of fun for me just because it was really the beginning of a big collaboration between you and I and ACG and my first foray into ACG. But we were sitting around your dining room table and you were telling me about this concert experience called Austin Pictures, and it was all centered around Jorge at that time. This was in early summer, and that you were planning on having, like we always do, having young people open that concert. And I wanted to know what piece that they were going to play, and maybe that was a little too soon for you to answer that question, and I offered to write a piece. And so I asked, what was your parameters, and you were thinking like maybe 3 minutes, about 10 to 15 people playing.
It's reasonable
and very reasonable. I was like, oh, it's May. I got so much time, it's no problem. And then over the course of the months that followed, you would call me and the piece would go like, because I think the first thing you said, well, let's invite everyone. And so it grew to like 150 people. I was like, well, whoa, okay.
It's like watching popcorn pop in slow motion.
And I thought, that I'm still in a very comfortable place. I could write for a bunch of guitars. That's something that I like doing and I've done before. And then the next call was, I think we should have the Miro play with them. And that is insane because that doesn't happen. It's like a reverse concerto. with 100 guitarists and these incredible musicians. And so, and they were, I mean, Daniel, you and the group were real heroes of mine. I got to work with you at UT, and so that was personally a big deal. And I felt like, oh my God, that's pretty exciting. But I was still holding on to my chair. I was still like, yeah, maybe this is gonna be just fine. And then the next call was that Peter was gonna conduct it. And as far as I know, Peter, that was the very first time a major American conductor had conducted a guitar orchestra, much less,
really
with the Miro String Quartet, an ensemble of that caliber. So as far as I know, that was a big first.
Wow.
And
I'll wear that proudly.
You should.
You should.
I've been in a daze for like 3 or 4 months after that and barely finished the piece, I know. But that's kind of how it started. But pretty early on, Matt, you kind of shared this vision of our town, of a picture of our city, of a bunch of people who were part of it, and really, really all of our city, as much as we could bring into it. And so the first thing I did, my wife Quentin and I, we drove around Austin and looked at what our city was with like kind of fresh eye, and found these things that I love about our city, the landscape, the water, the people, those grackles, our sunsets, and the fact that we are changing and growing and never stopped, and are always doing that. So.
Wow, Joe, that's beautiful. What are the first two movements called? Can you remind us of the names of the first two? And
sure, it is Hill Country, and then that is followed by Floating on Lady Bird Lake.
Hill Country and Floating on Lady Bird Lake. Beautiful. Well, I'm kind of feeling like we should listen to those right now. Is that okay, guys? And we'll come back, and Peter and Daniel, I need you two to talk about this too. But Joe, I think you just set it up for us perfectly. So I imagine you and Quentin driving around and seeing the Hill Country and Floating on Lady Bird Lake, and we're going to hear those two movements, and then we'll come back. I think that's perfect. Oh my goodness, what an experience. I haven't watched that in a while, and everything about it, Joe, the music, Peter, the performance, Daniel, oh my gosh, the what a incredible, and the vision of all those players. What an extraordinary experience. Peter, I'd love to maybe pick up with you, and what's it like for you seeing that, hearing it again, and what's going through your mind?
It makes me a little nervous seeing that again, because I remember now the rehearsals, trying to get 100 guitarists to attack a chord together, especially, I mean, I doubt very seriously that any of those guitarists had played in an ensemble of 100 or so. So for just to give a downbeat and hope that it'll all come in together was quite extraordinary. But you know, from the first rehearsal on, it just got incrementally better and better and better. And then adding the quartet was, I think, what made everyone in the guitar ensemble really focus, because the Miro's ensemble is so tight. The guitarists wanted to match that. And just watching the video again, I'd forgotten that Josh was kind of a conductor for the quartet, because John's back was to me, and I think you and Will were busy with your own thing. So Josh was helping beat time for the quartet while
just
I
trying
was
to play the
beating time
violin. We're just trying to figure out how to play the violin.
This is so wonderful to revisit the piece. It's so evocative and just expresses lots of moods very clearly, and that's not something that a lot of new pieces can do on first hearing.
I totally agree, and you know, I'm thoroughly biased, having had the great privilege of working with Joe Williams for these last 9 years, since this project, when we first started working on it. But it's you know, his music just draws you in so completely and tells you these stories, and he's able to do it with these, you know, small smart gestures and big atmosphere, and then tie it together in a way that leads you through a journey. And so that big swooshing opening hill country that we just heard, that big orchestral landscape, and so much color and variation in there, and then floating on Lady Bird Lake. I mean, that's exactly the experience we had with the guitars all doing that brushed sound, and those single lines coming in the violin, just incredible. Daniel, what are you thinking about in terms of seeing this again?
First off, I mean, I haven't. I'm trying to think if I've actually seen this since 2011. I think I've seen parts of it, but just seeing the whole thing. I mean, I have to throw kudos to all three of you gentlemen. I mean, Matt, first of all, like seeing the whole thing. I mean, you have KLRU who's filming this with this amazing cinematic. I mean, they've got cranes going and everything, and the lighting. I mean, it's pretty amazing. I mean, what you just came up with in your mind to just bring this together. And Peter, your absolute masterful command of these guitars. I mean, you were in total control. And the thing I was thinking when I was watching this, how old would have been the youngest of these players?
About 9.
Matt or Joe? 9?
Yeah.
Yeah,
sure.
I mean,
wow.
There weren't many of those. Mostly were middle school, high school, and then we had some adult players as well.
It's amazing. And they were varying levels and amounts of experience on the instrument, right? I mean, and Peter, you were mentioning like how many of them had played in large ensemble. I was thinking how many of them have actually seen a conductor in front of them. You know, I mean, that's a whole new language. I mean, for us who play orchestral instruments, we take that for granted that we know how to go with a conductor. But you found, I know you were working your body language that whole week trying to find something that would connect with them, and you totally, I mean, some of those chords, 100 guitars, you had them right there. It was amazing. And then Joe, that music is so beautiful. I mean, so much of that. I remember when we played it, I kept saying to the quartet, we all agreed. I mean, we were just like, this is fantastic. I mean, you look at the whole project, you say, let's write a piece for a string quartet and 100 guitarists. I mean, this really could go in 17,000 directions. And I mean, and Joe, I think you just took it that one place where it was just, we marvel at the project, but in the end, the music is just so
Absolutely.
evocative, and it is pictures, and I mean, everything about it. I mean, it's just, it brings me back. I remember how beautiful your music was. So I mean, for all you guys, I mean, it was, I mean, for the four of us to be a part of that was really big.
That's just makes me glow. I don't know how. That's so kind. I appreciate you guys sharing that. And you know what? I can't help but think too is that so much of this is trust. Like I see like just so much trust on that stage. Matt, you trust in all the people that you brought together to do this, and the microcosm of trust that is the Miro. Oh my God. But you know, one thing that like just to continue on what you were saying, Daniel, Peter, watching you rehearse the different ages, the different facility levels, the different timings. I remember you working on those quarter note triplets very clearly in my mind and being amazed to do something that was so challenging. And some of those challenges weren't obvious. Some of them were really subtle, playing so slow, you know. But I was struck by how gently and clear you were able to lead and build that trust. Is there anything that you think about when you look back at that time, or what you do specifically with young ensembles or maybe non-professional ensembles in that capacity?
Well, you're both very kind to make these comments. I'll have to say, though, that I think one of my first jobs as a conductor was to work with a youth orchestra. So I think from many years ago, I understand also as a player in an orchestra, as a young person, that, you know, there's a little bit of nervousness there. You want to please the conductor. You want to be together. You don't want to miss any notes. And so there's a lot of pressure, I think. And for all of them, especially the younger ones, having never played in in an ensemble, or B, an ensemble of this size, with a professional world-class string quartet sitting next to them, I'm sure there was a lot of pressure. I don't remember feeling it so much as seeing it once in a while. The eyelids, I mean, the eyes kind of bulged at times. But we had such a great time in the rehearsal, just because none of us had experienced that sound before. I had never heard a sound like that before in my lifetime. So it was all so exciting for all of us that I think that helped us put it together. And rhythmically, yes, we had a few things to sort out, but it just took 2 or 3 repetitions before they really got a hang of it. So I think my job was relatively easy here.
I mean,
Joe,
I kind of was I was kind of imagining that, you know, Joe, you're writing like that section at the end where the 100 guitars are all strumming really lightly, and you listening to it on your finale MIDI, and what that must have sounded like. And then when you finally heard it live, but you know, you had this image of, or this audio, you know, oral image of what that sounded like. I can't even imagine what you must have felt the first time you heard that. And
Relief.
Joe, you better
Joe,
take
was
us,
it what you imagined? When you heard the live sound, was it what you imagined, or how different was it?
You know, I think it was human, which is the best possible thing. When I write, I do use Sibelius, and so I hear all this computer version of these things that are very absolutely rhythmically precise, soulless and lifeless, and very disturbing. You really have to listen beyond that. And so, you know, I love the humanness of that performance, you know, and what I would describe is so much of the fearlessness and mastery that I hear in the Miro, and some, you know, some reaching in some of the younger players. I just love it. I think it's the way it's supposed to be.
Joe, you better take us into the last segment we're going to listen to, which is three movements. Now we've got the last three movements of the work. Can you tell us just a little bit about that? Prepare us for what we're going to hear.
Absolutely. So we'll hear Dance of the Grackles, of course, followed by Violet Crown with Cicadas. Violet Crown being Austin's Sunset with Cicadas. And then finally ending with Capital City Construction.
Wow, there's been a lot of that since then.
that fifth movement's still going.
Yes, still playing. Still playing. So wonderful. So Dance of the Grackles, Violet Crown with Cicadas, and Capital City Construction is the next three movements. Well, let's listen to those, and then we'll come back and we'll answer your questions, those of you watching. So be thinking about those. I know that lots of people are commenting already, but let's give our full attention to this incredible end of this piece. This is the movements 3, 4, and 5 of Austin Pictures, and we'll come back and chat about it afterward. Wow, gentlemen, what a wild ride we just had. It was so fun watching that. And it was also so fun watching the three of you, because you were all watching it with big smiles on your faces the entire time.
I'm sweating a little bit still.
Yeah.
Oh, what a joy. Joe, I got to go to you first, man. That's your piece. And what's it like hearing that again and watching it with these two and getting to talk about it and seeing all those faces again?
Oh man, it's a total blast. It's a real treat. It's a real treat to spend time with Daniel and Peter and you, Matt, to look at that, look back in time, and man, I think of all the faces that I recognize in that guitar orchestra, like Steve Kostelnik and Todd Waldron and Clive Luke, all of these young guitarists from McCallum and Albuquerque and Brownsville, and Matt Demon's groups in Oklahoma. Man, it's amazing to think of them now, I guess 9 years later. Wow, so much cool stuff has happened. It's good to see them.
And it's so neat. I'm looking at the chat that's happening right now in the YouTube chat. And for those of you watching, now's your big chance to ask questions, make comments. If you've something you've always been wanting to ask Daniel Ching or Peter Bay, then now's your big chance. So be writing in that chat. But yeah, we've had a few parents in the audience tonight. So Diane Skeel said my son had just started on his classical journey at Keeling Middle School that year, but now he's a college student, and then she said that she's wondering if Anton may have been the 9-year-old that we were talking about. Tom Gabrielson mentioned that his 13-year-old was in the ensemble at that point, and it's so fun. I know that young man very well. And so it's wild to think, but we've gotten some good questions that have come in as well, and so I think maybe we'll just get right to it if that's okay. We'll see what. But I have to read Edward Kimball's comment first. He says, "When I see all those young guitar players, their faces studies of concentration. What an impact that experience has had on them. They'll never forget it." And that's beautiful, Edward. Really, really appreciate that. Lennox asks you a question, Joe. Lennox says, how do you navigate crafting an aural landscape's story while still having it flow like a piece of music?
Good question, Lennox. I have no idea. Because I think.
Does anyone else have a question?
Well, I can give a guess, maybe. So I guess I think for me, I write motivically. I find these things like Matt, you were mentioning earlier, these kind of little units that kind of have a life of their own, and then I spend a lot of time with them to try and see where they want to go. I always love that Tom Waits quote that he will write a song and carry it around for as long as possible before he's forced to make it the song that it is, so it has a chance to live. Sometimes I do that. Sometimes I do that a little too much. But I think the best times is whenever I get lucky enough to find something and I'm able to listen to what it is, and then it kind of tells its own story if you're listening really hard.
Speaking of story, you have a Tom Waits story from our week together, don't you?
Yeah, actually, that's so funny, Daniel. So, well, do you want to tell it, or
no? You mentioned his name, so obviously, art is close to your heart.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan, and so we were doing a bunch of rehearsal and got to spend time with the Miro as they were preparing, and we just kind of we went through each piece and talked about how it worked, and almost every single moment it kind of just worked because they got it. And then we were doing the Dance of the Grackles, and they were playing it, and it was really too pretty. It was way too pretty, and I said, well, you have to think of this like an avian Tom Waits. This is a bird version of Tom Waits. You're stomping around and you're doing this, and then all of a sudden it just opened up right there.
That did it.
Never see Tom Waits the same way again.
I love it. Well, we had another question here. This is an interesting one. What drove the large number of guitarists, and why not just 30, and why not more than what we had? Kind of how did we land at that number? I think I'll probably speak to that one. I think so much of what we do at ACG is born of trust and partnership. And in this particular case, we knew of several collaborators in the world that were near enough to drive and were doing excellent work with guitar players in their community, college age or high school or younger. And so we asked them and basically told them that to select the players that would benefit from this experience and that would rise to the occasion. And so our dear colleagues brought who they brought. And of course, we knew we had a stage of a certain size and had to, and we knew we wanted a large ensemble because we wanted to have an experience for as many kids as possible, and also something that would look beautiful. And so we knew we wanted a bunch, but that's really what led to it. And so in a sense, that's kind of serendipity. But guided by really trusting the experts and the teachers and the community leaders that brought those kids. Peter, our rehearsal began at McCallum High School.
I remember it very well.
Orchestra director, and I remember when all the buses of kids showed up outside of McCallum, and they started coming out all carrying their guitars. It's something remarkable to see 30, 40, 50 kids walking in the same direction carrying guitar cases. Something's going to happen.
Oh, yeah. And well, of course, the performance was in a large theater, but the rehearsal was, I think, in the choral room, if I'm not mistaken. And which means it's, kind of a large classroom. So you can imagine the sound of everybody warming up in that room. It was quite amazing. And I was very grateful that it was a room full of guitarists and not trumpeters or trombonists or drummers.
Violinists.
I didn't go there, Daniel. I didn't go there.
I'll say it.
Right.
I no shame. 100 screeching violinists. No.
Wow. Well, that's a beautiful memory. And the other one, I mentioned this the other day to you, Peter, but I remember you coming with your young son to the Moody Theater for the first time. And this was one of those moments where Matt, the presenter, has little post-traumatic stress after events, after moments like this, remembering things like this. And what had happened was that there were many moving parts to this whole show. And one of the parts that had not actually been transported to Austin in time was the motor that was going to raise and lower the massive movie screen that we had ordered, so that we could fly the screen in and out to show the kids' artwork and to show the photographs, and then we had a short movie made and stuff. So we needed to fly that in and out during the show, and it needed to go in and out quickly. So they needed a high-speed motor, and the only one of those in Texas was in Houston. At the point that you arrived at the hall, Peter, which meant that this giant screen was flopped down, sort of like a sail that had been released from the mast. It sort of flopped down over on top of all the chairs and everything on the stage. So we couldn't actually rehearse in the place that we were trying to rehearse. I think we ended up starting backstage or something. I don't remember what we did, but we improvised for a while.
Can't remember.
Finally got our motor driven to Austin from Houston.
Wow. Yeah, and Colin would have been just a little over 3 years old. Wow.
I remember it well, and I don't know how that all got negotiated, but I do remember maybe it's kind of the emotion of that moment is burned into my psyche.
Matt, I remember looking at the stage and looking at you and thinking, oh my God.
What have you done?
No, not like what you had done. But like, I remember thinking, wow, this is a real situation. But you handled it like you always so elegantly do, man.
I love it. Well, we just have so many beautiful things that are coming into this chat. I'm seeing people really enjoying the format. People are actually enjoying our chat, which is really nice to see. and getting a little bit of behind the scenes work. And Sandy Yamamoto says it sounds awesome, so I like that.
Okay,
Daniel, that's a
no bias.
No, extra great comment. One thing I am seeing a little bit is some questions about when the next event like this is going to happen. And then somebody chimed in, Peter, with a comment I believe you were alluding to a minute ago backstage, which is the 10-year anniversary is coming up. So maybe we ought to think about something like this again. I will maybe let the three of you think about a final comment or two. I think we'll wrap this up here in a sec because it's about 8:15. But as we're getting ready to go, I'd like to say that we're going to do a couple more of these watch parties in the next couple of Tuesdays. So an event exactly like this is going to be happening soon. And don't forget that 2 weeks from now, we're going to do the Austin Pictures Watch Party Part 2 with the guitarist, Jorge Caballero, here. And so that will be a lot of fun. And we'll also get a little bit deeper into the artworks that were made, because there was 11 visual art pieces that were commissioned for this particular project as well. So we'll talk about those a little bit more. We also have some live events coming up that we're going to be announcing pretty soon, so stay tuned for those. Joe, you have been working on a big, beautiful collaborative project that we're going to be releasing later on in the month, but certainly there's two of these that are cooking right now, really. And what this is ways for guitarists to make beautiful musical and artistic projects together in this age of social distancing. And so we're really excited that this tradition of many guitarists coming together and doing stuff has continued strong here at ACG, and even now when we're doing it mostly electronically. So maybe Daniel, I'll start with you. Anything you'd like to say to our viewers, or that you might share in retrospect before we close up tonight?
Well, I mean, we've talked a lot about the project, this happening 9 years ago. We talked about Austin, and of course all of us know what's going on right now. And just watching that again, I was just so proud of everything Austin, arts community Austin. I mean, bringing all these great things together. We didn't actually also really mention Moody Theater was very involved in this whole thing. And at this time when we can't be together, to watch something that is all about togetherness and all about community, and the great talent, Joe, Peter, and Matt, and ACG, and everybody involved. So this was really fun, and I do hope we get to do it again. And stay safe, Austin. And I know that we will all be able to enjoy music and arts together again very soon. So, yeah.
Beautiful, Daniel. Thank you so much. Peter, how about you? Maybe I'll.
Well, like all of us, we are lucky to be in a city where there's an embarrassment of riches as far as the arts are concerned. To have such a remarkable organization like Austin Classical Guitar, which has so many different programs on its own. You got a dynamic leaders in Matt and Joe. To have a world-renowned string quartet living here as well is remarkable. I just feel such gratitude having been part of this, a very small part of this project. I loved seeing this again. I loved hearing the music and reliving all of the excitement that surrounded the rehearsals and the performance. And I love this experience. Really enjoyed doing this with all of you, and especially those of you who are watching on YouTube. Thank you very much.
Beautiful. Thank you, Peter. Joe, maybe I'll give it to you for a comment here.
Sure. Well, I couldn't echo you more, Peter. I'm just filled with gratitude that we got to do this back in the day, and Daniel and Matt, and then I guess, and now, like, we get to do this now. Maybe I'll take a note from you also, Peter, of obsessing, listening to all the Beethoven piano sonatas and string quartets. Maybe that's what we need. We have an opportunity here to really obsess about some really wonderful things and find new ways to make art in our time and not wait.
Guys, I can't thank you enough. I do think that this work, this whole evening of Austin Pictures, our chance to relive it again now, is is such a beautiful testament to our community. That night was live broadcast on the radio by KMFA. Diane Donovan was in the audience. Right. Toni Morris was in the audience. They were live doing it. I remember in one of the intermissions, I went and did a mini interview and came back. The Alamo Drafthouse cut together the video product and did all of the projections for us. Henry Matzo over there put all of that together. I remember sitting up in his office and up above the South Lamar Alamo Drafthouse, watching that video and having them put that together for us. And What Citizens, the Alamo, KMFA, KLRU, of course, made this TV show, connected us with the Moody Theater, and that production staff was amazing. And then, you think all the kids we just saw, and you guys, and Jorge. And to me, I guess what's so miraculous is what's always so miraculous. I think about, I mentioned at the beginning of the show tonight that we just had 77 donors step up and buy guitars for kids in Title I schools here in Austin so they can play at home. And all of this is togetherness. It's what music does. It's what goodwill does. And it gives, we have a choice, and we have this opportunity to participate in that and help the people around us experience beauty and experience kindness. And I love Austin for that. And I'm really grateful to all of you. Really grateful to everyone who's watching tonight. And we'll look forward to our next chance to share beautiful stuff together. Please be safe, and please take care of yourself, and smile, and we'll be back together again soon. Thank you all.